Story continued from Fire Like a Leo playlist. The sun hangs low in the sky, and yet activity around the Diprotodon carcass is as busy as ever. All around the gutted and stripped remains, scavengers bide their time. Since the herbivore was brought down, various small species have tried to get a bite to eat, but have been repeatedly fended off by multiple larger carnivores. The noisiest are the Sarcophilus, mainland relatives of the modern Tasmanian devil, hissing impatiently and baring their long fangs. Behind them are a group of thylacines, gnawing on a few toe bones they were able to rip from the kill not long ago. Of course, carrion birds are here in numbers, from common crows to a single wedge-tailed eagle, though after waiting for close to an hour, the bird of prey eventually flies off to secure his own meal, not being as reliant on carrion as the species that has gathered here in large numbers. The species in question is the fluttering horde of Cryptogyps, Australia's only known vulture. Standing just over a metre tall and with a wingspan of 2.5 metres, they are about average size for a vulture, though they are the only ones to have taken their scavenger lifestyle to the land down under. Cryptogyps have wings built to soar high in the air for hours on end, using their highly adapted eyes to spot out signs of dead animals, and with an abundance of megafauna all across the continent at this time, death can be around every corner. They prefer more open or arid regions, as dense tree cover can make it hard to pick out a meal even with a bird's eye view. But Cryptogyps have a near continental range, their wide-winged silhouettes common sights no matter where one might be looking up from. The vultures at this location eye the carcass, displaying a range of behaviours. Some stand patiently, others strut back and forth, hissing quietly, their hunger evident. Having to wait, they busy themselves with grooming, picking at the parasites or cleaning their feathers, while the tired ones roost in the trees, heads tucked against their chest. Previously, the carcass was occupied by a large quincana that had chased off a female Fire Like a Leo, who had, only minutes before, chased off a Waka Leo, both of which fled to a nearby tree. When the massive croc had eaten its fill and left, the Cryptogyps swarmed the dead Diprotodont, along with the Sarcophilus alerting the Thylacoleo, who had reclaimed the carcass, chasing off the scavengers and eating her fill. When she had retreated to some shade and fallen asleep, the hungry birds and marsupials had rushed it again, only to be sent running by the Wakaleo, who had been confined to the treetops till then. Once more, the Cryptogyps that hadn't been able to feed were forced to wait, as the medium-sized carnivore ate leisurely, while the Sarcophilus and Thylacines grabbed what meager bits of offal they could pry from under the Wakaleo's nose. A near-constant chorus of screeching and chattering echo from the flock of Cryptogyps as more and more of the carcass disappears into the bellies of the various mammals that pick at it, while the birds ready themselves for whatever scraps remain. Finally, the Wakaleo pulls his head out from under what remains of the rear legs. Face covered in dried blood, he shakes himself and opens up his jaws, letting out a fusion of a yawn and a burp. Content that he couldn't eat any more, the smaller of the two marsupial lions present trots over to the nearest tree and begins to climb, though noticeably slower than usual, being stuffed full and all. The devilish screams of the Sarcophilus ring out as the little mammals run at the Diprotodont remains, alerting the sleeping Cryptogyps in the trees. The ones on the ground were already in flight, beating their wings rapidly to cover the short distance between them and their long-awaited meal. The sound of flapping was only beat out by the accompanied screeching as the vultures dove on the carcass and in a few seconds flat. The vacant corpse was almost buried under a mass of feathered bodies. Flesh is torn, tendons pulled, bones scraped as the beaks of the Cryptogyps snap and rip at the remaining tissue. Some snap at their fellows, trying to get at the more pristine cuts, while pairs pull at pieces of meat, breaking it into smaller pieces that are easier to swallow. One of the vultures gets into a tug-of-war with a Sarcophelus, each holding one end of a long piece of sinew in their mouths. The bird and the devil wrench their heads back, each letting out horrific screams as the piece they fight over rips and eventually snaps, giving each an equal amount. The noise of the feast spreads throughout the forest as the vultures and crows squawk and bicker, despite the fact there is enough left over for all of them, even with half of their number having to stand back from the mobbed carcass, forced to wait even longer. With most of the organs and large cuts of meat gone, the Cryptogyps and other scavengers will take every morsel of flesh they can. Given enough time, there will be nothing left but bone. Where the bones have been broken by the quincana or the Thylacoleo, the keen-eyed vultures can even pick out the exposed marrow as well, though they can only swallow small pieces of bone, and are unable to break them apart on their own. The female Thylacoleo is awoken by the feeding frenzy, and does her best to ignore the commotion. Nursing multiple young means she has to feed more often, and even at their present tiny size, the process of producing milk for them is noticeably taxing, so she may feed again soon, despite being full, if the birds leave anything at all. A shadow glides over her body, and her eye swivels to look skyward. Another scavenger is arriving, but not one of the Cryptogyps. Something similar, but much more powerful. Story continued, next episode. Hello fellow travellers and welcome back. Today we will be breaking down the only known vulture to make it to Australia, Cryptogyps. The first remains of this genus consisted of parts of the humerus and quadrate bone found in the Kalamurina Park of South Australia, leading to it originally being assigned to the genus Tapetus, an extinct eagle in 1905. This wasn't helped by the fact that Tapetus turned out to be just prehistoric remains of modern eagles, such as the wedge-tailed eagle. It wasn't until 2022 that a detailed examination of these remains and many others were done, and it was found that the original remains, named in 1905, did belong to a unique and now extinct genus, and that it wasn't an eagle, but a genus of Old World vulture. This specimen, along with others found around the country, were given the name Cryptogyps lacatosus, the species name meaning powerful, and the genus name being a play on the word crypt, is also a combination of the Greek words hidden and vulture, a clever nod to the fact that its true identity as a genus of vulture was hidden for over a century. Cryptogyps is believed to have lived during the Pleistocene, with remains being dated to between 700,000 and 50,000 years ago. Remains now attributed to it have been found across the continent of Australia, including additional sites in South Australia, Wellington Cave in New South Wales, and the Nullarbor Plains in Western Australia. Size has been difficult to calculate due to the relative scarcity of the bones, with estimates putting its weight as high as 12 kilos, but more recently, more conservative calculations have put its weight between 3 and 6 kilos. In terms of body size and wing width, it's comparable to the modern wedge-tailed eagle, the largest extant bird of prey in Australia. So a length about 80 to 120 centimeters, plus a wingspan between 180 and 250 centimeters on average. Though being a vulture and not an eagle, the builds of these two birds were likely quite different. When comparing it to other Old World vultures, this would make Cryptogyps the second smallest, only beaten out by the hooded vulture from Africa. Speaking of Old World vultures, where does Cryptogyps fit on its family tree? Well, that depends on which of the two phylogenetic trees that have been presented, one being released the same year was named in 2022, and the second in the following year of 2023. Both place Cryptogyps in the large family called Apipotryptidae, which includes eagles, hawks, kites, harriers, and Old World vultures. For the record, New World vultures are in a separate family, called Cataridae. and as their name suggests, they are only found in the Americas. In the 2022 tree, Cryptogyps was placed within Old World vultures in the Abgyptinae subfamily, with its closest relatives being the hooded vulture and the Eurasian griffon vulture. The 2023 tree proposes that Cryptogyps was still within Aegyptinae, but just outside Old World vultures, and being not too distantly related to serpent eagles, which includes the Philippines eagle. Either way, it is closer to vultures than to eagles, and that becomes more obvious when we take a closer look at its legs. Bones often have the markings or grooves where muscles attached in life, and while the grooves on Cryptogyps's legs do suggest it had stronger muscles than extant vultures, they were far weaker than active predatory birds, such as eagles and hawks. This makes it easy to conclude that, like its modern relatives, Cryptogyps was primarily a scavenger, feeding on the corpses of already dead animals and rarely actively hunting its own prey. Vultures are effectively the only obligate vertebrate scavengers alive today. Their bodies are built for flying at high elevation and soaring over long distances, meaning they use little energy while searching a wide area for carrion. New World vultures have a good sense of smell for birds, but Old World vultures do not, relying on their incredible eyesight to pick out potential food. Some species of vulture can be picky when it comes to what part of a carcass they eat, but most will consume any bits of flesh and even cartilage, with only the most rotten of meat not considered edible. Like its modern counterparts, Cryptogyps would have been performing a vital ecological role in disposing of decaying animal carcasses and reducing the spread of diseases and viruses that accumulate on dead bodies. For a long time, it was a puzzle to scientists that no vultures or vulture-like species existed during the Pleistocene in Australia, as there was a range of megafauna like on other continents at the time. Turns out there was this whole time, and there may have been others, but bird bones rarely fossilize, or in this case last long, due to them being too thin and delicate, so finding them, not to mention identifying them, is quite unlikely. Behaviours like whether they were solitary scavengers or ate together, i.e. mobbing a body, are mostly speculative. With its size, though, a group of Cryptogyps may have been able to secure a carcass from most other birds and even small reptiles and mammals, though medium or large ones would likely have to merely chase off the Cryptogyps, and being quite frail, they wouldn't put up much of a fight. But their specialization in a diet mostly consisting of carrion may have been their downfall. As many of you that have been keeping up with this playlist know, Australia went through a gradual mass extinction that seemed to have reached its peak around 50,000 years ago, which saw almost all megafauna disappear from the continent. With most of the megafauna gone, there wasn't enough carrion of significant size to support the populations of large scavenging birds like Cryptogyps. We see something similar today with condors. There used to be much larger species of condor and close relatives during the Ice Age, but when the mammoths, sloths, wild horses, and many other large animals died out, so did these larger species, and the remaining two became much reduced in both numbers and range. Nowadays, various animals break down the dead throughout Australia's many ecosystems, like dingoes, goannas, and even quolls, with many birds filling in Cryptogyps's role like crows, kites, and eagles. Some interesting facts about vultures in general is that they can digest rotten meat thanks to having some of the most powerful stomach acids in the animal kingdom, so strong it kills viruses that would be lethal to almost any other animal. Going on from that, they defecate on their own legs, both to cool down and because the waste contains its own strong disinfectant that sterilizes their legs after they have been likely ankle deep in body parts after every feeding. The feces also kill any viruses that have gotten into the soil around carcasses, preventing their spread even further. So as we can see, Cryptogyps and its entire family really did an extremely important ecological service, and continue to do today. Though in Australia today there is little need for an obligate scavenger bird, And until the ecosystem is able to recover enough where megafauna are indeed large enough in numbers again, it's likely no vulture or close relative will be able to get a foothold in Australia for a very long time. In positive scavenger news, Tassie devils have been reintroduced to the mainland Australia, only in a few selected fenced-off preserves, but it is an effort to get the current largest marsupial carnivore alive to repopulate these areas and hopefully balance out the ecosystem in multiple ways. An interesting experiment and a great recovery since we nearly lost the species a few years back after that outbreak of facial tumours. But what do you think of Cryptogyps? And for my question of the week, which is your favourite vulture species? Mine is the bearded vulture, a beautiful bird that lives exclusively on bones. Absolutely metal. What lesser known extinct bird would you like me to do a breakdown on next? And until then, please like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.